Welcome back to the Humble Market Timer YouTube channel. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. In today's video, we're going to look at Apple. Are we finally getting a top signal after a massive run? Before I go any further, please check the description for my disclaimer. Once again, these are my sole ideas, not investment advice. Now, for the sake of this video, I really want to just look at the technicals of Apple, sort of past and where we are currently, and see what story it's kind of telling us. And so what I have on the screen here is sort of a channel in which Apple traded from 2012 to about 2020. And one thing I wanted to make note is I want you to note how organized and uniform Apple traded within this parallel from 2012 all the way to about 2017. So for 5 years, it traded perfectly inside this parallel. And I wanted to kind of show you that from a historical standpoint so you can see how Apple typically trades. So when it's in that groove and when it finds that pocket in a parallel, you can pretty easily point out the tops and the bottoms through that parallel. And that kind of makes the price action and entry and exits fairly predictable. But if you notice, once you started getting trading outside the parallel, you went out here and then you consolidated for a bit, dipped back down, made your way back up, went back down, and then you had a nice push up. And then, of course, you had COVID. But when you have these things, this bit of action right here, a lot of times this sort of acts as an outlier. So you really can't look at it from a standpoint of this is what naturally happens. So I think what we would have seen is, had this not happened, is more consolidation, and then we would eventually have gotten that, that big push up back in 2020. But again, the main point I wanted to show you is how uniform and organized Apple normally trades within a parallel. When it gets out of the parallel, you know it's either about to explode higher or it's going to push lower. So this was the initial parallel, but then we had, as I stated, that big push after the pandemic, and that created another parallel, a wider and bigger parallel, as you can see here. And so this has been the trading action in Apple from the 2020s all the way until now. As you can see, we initially went to around the midpoint, went back down to the bottom of the parallel, went to the top, midpoint, top, fooled around a bunch of times in the midpoint, back to the top, finally worked our way down. Went a little above the midpoint, hit the midpoint again, all the way back down. Then went all the way back up to the top. You can see how the midpoint in many instances acted as either support or resistance in the price action for Apple. So that shows you that this is a very nice parallel. And again, the uniformity in which Apple has traded in the parallel, again, for another 5 years. Again, historically, we looked at it initially from 2012 to 2017, nicely in the parallel for 5 years. And here's another stretch, 5 years, nicely within the parallel. And in this stretch, it would have, if you had recognized the parallel, it would be pretty easy to pick entrances and exits because the parallel tells the story in Apple. Also, you could look at points of entries and exits. Oftentimes, we had these bottoms in the parallel. They corresponded with or coincided with bottoms in the RSI. So when we got to that 30-ish area on the RSI that typically, we're talking weekly RSI, that typically signaled we're approaching a bottom in Apple. And at that point, you can then expect quite a bounce in the price action. So let's kind of look at Apple a little more zoomed in. Let's kind of look at it now. And you can still see that same parallel. It didn't disappear. But one thing I want you to note, this is a daily chart now. We're looking at Apple. I mentioned that we went and hit the bottom, and we worked our way all the way back to the top of this parallel. But look at what we just created today. We had a red candle signifying potentially a top in Apple. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a top, but at the very least, it's a warning sign. And particularly when we had a big day in the overall markets, a lot of technology stocks participated, but Apple didn't. And so when you start seeing companies that have had a nice run up, and Apple had actually run up and had about maybe 7, 8 consecutive green days, and this was the first red day. And so I think it was pretty predictable that you would start to see some profit taking or some resistance at the very top of the parallel, and that's exactly what we got. So what I think you need to pay attention to is this red candle at the very top of the parallel, is this a top signal? You always need to have confirmation, so you need follow-through days to ensure that, okay, we have reached the top and we're about to pull back. Or you need to take more of a wait-and-see approach, typically because Apple is a pretty strong company. They always make a lot of money. This is sort of the Christmas season. A lot of people buy a lot of Apple products. We're sort of in the midst of, possibly in the midst of a Santa rally. So there could be a potential for it to move higher. But as of the charts, you're seeing there's lots of resistance because we are at the very top of the parallel. Just to kind of look and see what Apple has done when it's been at the top of parallels around the Christmas season. Let's kind of look back and see if we can find some examples of how Apple has acted when it's been near the top of parallels, at top of a parallel during the holiday season, during that December time frame. And as you can see here is a section where we were near highs and we were right around that December time frame. Let's kind of draw some lines here. December 1st was about right here. That's hold on. Here's about where December 1st was. Let's do a clone of that and move that to the end of December of 2021. And this is that area right here. You can see we're at the top of the parallel. We're in that Christmas season. There's the possibility of the Santa rally. We did have a little move up above the parallel, nothing major though. So even when we were in uptrending portion of the season, in that 2021 time frame in December, we still didn't get a massive push above the parallel. The parallel still, for the most part, acted as a level of resistance. It's just one example. Maybe it's an outlier, maybe it's not, but I don't think anyone should rush into necessarily saying, okay, let's short it, let's hammer the shorts on this. But at the same time, you have to respect the very top of the parallel because it has shown to be resistance for Apple on many occasions. And again, we're in that 5-year window. In the past, after that 5-year window, it's Apple's chart started acting a little crazy, and it started working its way out of the parallel. Could that happen again? Don't know. Kind of have to wait and see. But as of right now, when you see the price action and you see that red candle after all these up days right at the top of the parallel, that typically means a top. So keep an eye out on it. Hope you like the content. If you like it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.